Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Bianca Collins. I'm curator of public programs for the Fowler Museum at UCLA. Thank you for joining us today or tonight, depending on where it is you're tuning in from around the world. The Fowler is continuing its history of supporting social justice by joining the worldwide celebration of Pride. It is our honor to co-present today's program, Archiving Gay History, with UCLA Film and Television Archive and One Archives at USC Libraries, streaming to you from UCLA Film and Television Archive's virtual screening room. We're coming together in community today to discuss recent work by contemporary artist Sadie Barnette and filmmaker Whitney Skauge at the intersection of art archives and anti-erasure efforts. Recent celebrated projects by Barnette and Skauge use as a primary medium archival content to share the lives of two gay Black activists. The 1992 presidential candidate Terence Alan Smith, aka Joan Jett Blakk, and Black Panther Party member Rodney Barnette, who established the first Black-owned gay bar in San Francisco. Both figures fought against political oppression and advocated for the safety of their community at the height of the AIDS crisis in the early 90s. So today you are in for a jam-packed hour. First, Sadie will present her work, followed by a brief conversation with One Archives curator, Lexi Johnson. Then we'll screen The Beauty President, followed by a brief conversation with director Whitney Skauge and Outfest's Farida Badamosi. Then all four participants will join in conversation, moderated by the archive's May Home HaDuong. This program was pre-recorded, so we will not have an audience question and answer following the program. However, some of our program participants have joined us today to answer audience questions live in the chat. So let me introduce my guests and we will be on our way. Sadie Barnette's multimedia practice illuminates her own family history as it mirrors a collective history of repression and resistance in the US. Barnette has a BFA from CalArts and an MFA from UC San Diego. Her work is in permanent collections of LACMA, Brooklyn Museum, Studio Museum in Harlem, and the Guggenheim Museum. Her permanent site-specific commission at LAX International Airport will open in 2024. Barnette lives and works in Oakland, California, and is represented by Jessica Silverman. Thanks, Sadie. Farida Badamosi is the artistic director of Outfest, one of the only global LGBTQIA+ arts, media, and entertainment organizations empowering artists, communities, and filmmakers to transform the world through their stories. Badamosi oversees the year-round artistic vision for the organization's many programs, including the Outfest UCLA Legacy Project, the only program in the world exclusively dedicated to preserving lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender moving images at risk of becoming lost due to deterioration and neglect. Thanks, Farida. May Home HaDuong, a UCLA alumna, joined the UCLA Film and Television Archive as its fourth director in 2021. Previously, she was the senior manager of public access at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, where she served as a principal representative for the Academy's Film Archive. Before that, she was the project manager for the Outfest UCLA Legacy Project for LGBTQ moving image preservation, a collaboration between the Archive and Outfest, which produces the Outfest LA LGBTQ Film Festival. Home HaDuong currently serves on the Legacy Project Advisory Committee and on the Board of Directors of the One Archives Foundation. Thanks, May. Alexis Bard Johnson is the curator at the One Archives at the USC Libraries. She oversees the exhibitions and programs at one of the largest repositories of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer materials in the world. Johnson earned her PhD in art history with a minor in feminist, gender, and sexuality studies from Stanford University. And before joining One, Johnson worked at the Princeton Art Museum, the Whitney Museum, and the Terra Foundation for American Art. Thanks, Alexis. Whitney Skauge is an award-winning filmmaker dedicated to diverse storytelling and representation. They are Vice President of Development at two-time Oscar-nominated studio Breakwater Studios, dedicated to the craft of the short documentary. Skauge's debut short film, The Beauty President, in 2020, produced by Breakwater Studios, premiered at South by Southwest and was distributed by LA Times Short Docs in 2021. Skauge's films act as an extension of social and political activism with the hope of helping audiences understand themselves and the world around them better. All right. Thank you, Whitney. That's all from me. Over to you, Sadie.
Thank you so much for all of those warm and exciting introductions. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I'm going to really jump right in, show some slides about this project that I have had the honor of working on for the past few years. So this project is called the New Eagle Creek Saloon, and it honors my father's bar by the same name, which he ran in San Francisco for just a few years, from 1990 to 93. But there is like a lifetime of stories and histories tucked into those few years. And so I think what I will do very briefly is just read from my personal statement about this project so that I can stay on time and get, some of the most important information out right away. So the New Eagle Creek Saloon 2019 is an installation and a vibe that reimagines my father's bar, the first Black-owned gay bar in San Francisco. I built the glittering bar structure, glowing somewhere between a monument and an altar, as an invitation, a place to be, and an invocation. I did not want to make a project about the bar. I needed to make a project that was the bar, that bent space and time and reanimated the bones of the Eagle Creek in an intergenerational revival. So my bar is not quiet as it honors. It is a party. It is all my friends and my dad's people. It is permission to dance and dream, to call the names of those lost, and to see one another as we are in the glow of our own small moments of freedom. So this project was first commissioned by the Lab in San Francisco, which is an amazing organization that I'd love to shout out. And this is the installation there. I'll kind of describe the physicality of the bar. So it's this U shape, which really kind of signals to people, welcome, saddle on up, put your elbows on the bar, get comfortable. It's made out of plexiglass, steel, holographic vinyl, objects, LED lights. It was built very strong and tough, which ended up coming in handy because this thing has lived quite a life. I'll show just a few quick details. I really wanted this piece to be in the language and vernacular of my work, my visual art practice, which has a lot of these kind of glittering, glowing, otherworldly, outer spacey kind of scraper car culture, Oakland visual references. I felt like it was really important to honor the spirit of the Eagle Creek by really doing me, if that makes sense. There, on the top of the bar, there are photos of the original patrons of the bar, members, my father usually calls them, because as he says, the Eagle Creek was more like a community center that just happened to serve alcohol. There are other moments in the installation that feel a bit more like an altar and honorific. A couple of the gentlemen in this photograph are my father's brothers, who were instrumental in helping my father to fundraise for the business and building out the space and making it super beautiful inside the bar, which was really important to my father. They didn't identify as queer, but it was a family project and they were just down for the adventure. This is another element. This is one of the kind of, you could say, icons of the bar. Sammy, nicknamed Miss La Creek. And I just love this photo with the gold and the press on nails, and, kind of, I think was just hopping behind the bar and kind of like, star on bar, pretending to bartend or helping out. So that Sammy has really become a character in the story and someone who is no longer with us, but who, whose name we call often in this project. And that's kind of what the bar is made out of. But honestly, what actually makes the project happen is the people. So this is one of the events at the lab. My friend Redwood Hill was bartending. And, I often say that when we first built this piece on the Friday before it opened, it felt like a sculpture. But after we invited people in and people, danced and laughed and flirted and exchanged phone numbers, it didn't feel like a sculpture. It felt like a temple, like a place where something happens. And that really just exceeded all of my, wildest dreams of what this project could do, and really, shaking up the energy and actually bringing like this story to life. So this is my friend Jahari DJing with this amazing, Keith Haring designed Sylvester record. We did a bunch of events, and even the flyers were kind of an opportunity to get into the vernacular of a bar and then make it look less like a flyer for an art exhibit, but more like a party flyer. This is my friend Rashad Pridgeon, who offered an amazing, mind-blowing ritual, which you either had to be there or it's impossible to explain. And another really important element is this zine, which I feel, can kind of travel its own life. And my dream would be that, someone would see this on someone's coffee table or bookshelf and say, oh, the Eagle Creek, that sounds familiar. I was there. I remember that bar, and that we can continue to collect more stories and, kind of create a literal paper trail as well as a digital paper trail of this project. When I first started working on this project, people would say, oh, have you gone to this archive or that archive? And what I kind of had to tell people was this name isn't in those archives, and that's why I'm making its own archive. So this is one of the ways that was important to me to do that and really get some of the limited ephemera that we do have into a physical copy of the zine. The zine is also now available. All the content is online at the Studio Museum's amazing kind of archival section of their website. And so you can see everything there. And that's been something that's been really great to share with students. And again, just trying to, get this history and this name out there, because there had previously been no, Wikipedia page, no Netflix documentary. Grad students weren't studying the Eagle Creek. And so really trying to create a legacy and preserve a legacy. And then I'll just mention a few of the other really exciting kind of larger than life moments that this project has really taken me on this journey. We knew that we needed to take the bar to Pride because my father had participated with the original Eagle Creek in 1992 in the Pride Parade, and his patrons basically just said, Rodney, like, you've got to get out there. We have this amazing multiracial Black and brown community, and we don't see that in Pride. And so everyone got together, fundraised. One gentleman sewed all the costumes. It was really this, labor of love and act of community to participate. And I was actually on the float as like a 6-year-old. And, needless to say, it was really an amazing kind of work of art. And so I knew we had to do that. We built the bar to fit on a flatbed truck so that we could take it to SF Pride in 2019. And really, everybody who had gathered at the lab over the past, couple of months of events and panels and film screenings were able to come out into the streets and kind of reclaim, Pride for this brief moment and this brief space, in what's become a fairly corporate event. And one of my favorite moments was when someone came up and said, oh, the Eagle Creek, I thought that bar closed. And I'm like, yeah, it closed 30 years ago, but we're time traveling and bringing it back. And I think on the float, there was like an 8-month-old baby up until 80 years old. It was very intergenerational, which has been a really special aspect of this project that doesn't always necessarily happen in queer spaces for reasons that are very understandable. And then just recently, at the top of this year, the project went to the Kitchen in New York, was curated by Legacy Russell, and especially after kind of being locked out of dance floors for a couple of years in the pandemic, being able to join together in this historic space in New York City and like do some amazing dance parties was just really, really moving. And, gathering can no longer be taken for granted. Obviously, in thinking about queer history, the safety of gathering was never guaranteed. So I will just end with a few of the really important collaborators that worked on this project at the kitchen. This is Madison Moore, who curated a whole kind of residency of events within the bar and brought so much fierce music and scholarship to this project. I really encourage everyone to follow Madison Moore's work. They have a book called Fabulous about queer nightlife. Really turn that out. We're also lucky enough to have DJ Wana and Tyga Paw, who just absolutely took me on kind of a musical journey that felt so close to my own personal experience in, bars and nightclubs and cars. And that was really just unforgettable. And also the Black Aesthetic Collective presented an amazing film screening. You can see this archival footage that's being shown on the left is from a Sylvester birthday party, and just these really kind of special, not often seen archival threads that they were able to present. And very lastly, I will leave it on my father and I. My dad is, he's an active participant in this project. He's a collaborator. He gets to tell the story and speak for himself, and we get to have these conversations and exchanges together. And I feel so very lucky for that. And yeah, we continue to do this project and hopefully have some other locations coming up, so people can just kind of stay tuned and hopefully can come and hang out at the bar with us. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks so much for sharing, Sadie. That was really great. And I was lucky enough to be able to see the iteration of Eagle Creek when it came to LA. So I feel delighted about that and happy to be in conversation today about kind of the project. I'll ask a few questions now and hopefully we can kind of touch on more things during our group conversation. But one of the things that I feel so striking about this project and what you nicely presented and kind of even ended on is that it's site specific. Obviously, it's a bar that was owned by your father in San Francisco. I believe the name even came from the bar that was there before your dad bought it, but now it's traveled. It's been recreated in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, even in Pride. And so one question I wanted to start out with was just maybe to ask you to think a little bit about how those different iterations have felt, how they came about, what it's been like to take something that's so site specific to place and then bring it to other locations. Has it changed the energy? Do you feel like the energy, the vibe, as you say, it's been the same? Just, yeah, kind of an opening question like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the format of this whole project isn't necessarily, the most logical choice. It just happens to be what I do and the only thing that I'm good at doing, which is making artwork. And so I just really had to lean into what I do and know that that would probably be the best thing that I could do for the Eagle Creek. But it ended up working in all these ways that I didn't even really anticipate, in the kind of flexibility that having this be an actual space allows for people, and people are bringing in their own experiences. Especially I felt like when I was in New York with the project, where a lot of people don't necessarily have their own San Francisco bars or San Francisco history, but everybody brought some bar with them, and it kind of became that bar for them. The first bar they went to when they were growing up, when they were coming out, when they were, discovering and creating who they were and are, that all of those bars kind of enter with people wherever it is. And I think another element was rather practical, which is that I didn't have a lot of evidence of exactly what the bar looked like. And I didn't have a lot of, ephemera or objects from the original bar. So that kind of led me right away to just abandon trying to replicate the bar and trying to make, you know, 4 walls that looked like the bar. Instead, I decided to just make this glittering, glowing kind of orb that could take up however much space it was given. And I did that because I kind of had to invent it, but also because it felt like it would feel more like the bar than if I tried to make it look like the bar. You know, the bar itself was like, you know, just a real space in reality, but obviously it's larger than life and as far as what it did for people. And so I think the only way to honor it was to make it like a little bit extra. And when we did the project in San Francisco, we were lucky enough to have, you know, some of the former members of the bar come and share their story. And so that was really specific and special to that location. You know, my dad a lot of times was just busy running a bar, and so he didn't necessarily know how impactful it was to people. But, you know, people talked about kind of coming out through that community and, you know, arriving to the bar with their hoods on and kind of being shy, and then eventually shedding the hood and being proud. And so those kinds of things have been amazing. But I'm also really excited to learn about other cities and their histories and their current, you know, scenes and communities. So I've definitely, you know, learned a lot by traveling. And I know when Madison was curating events at the Kitchen, they were really intentional about bringing in people from other cities that have amazing, you know, music and queer scene legacies, from DC to Detroit. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that. And I feel like what you said at the beginning really resonates, which is when you make something that's so specific to one place, it actually opens up into something that's much more universal often, and people can kind of find moments of connection in a way that if you think you make something so broad, then it's hard for people to gain access. And so I wanted to kind of follow up on this conversation with specific questions around the few items that were from the original bar, like the mirror pieces or the photographs of members, you know, kind of one, who took them, how did they survive, thinking about archives in that way, and the things that we do actually have tangibly, and then we'll get into things that you had to kind of recreate. So maybe a question around those objects that did come from the original opening of the bar, and kind of feeling around energy, or how you wanted to treat them differently or specially or not at all, kind of.
Yeah, those things are so special to me. And of course, I wish there were more things, but I feel that the fact that it's limited is also, you know, makes them even more precious. And my dad isn't necessarily so much a saver, but he's a doer. And so I think there might be some reasons why you're not necessarily both. But I will say, you know, that one of my hopes is also that maybe there's someone out there with a bunch of photographs that we just haven't found yet. And so every time I, you know, do a talk or have the event, I'm hoping that someone's gonna just come up and have like amazing photographs. But we were able to get a few photographs from friends, or a few photographs that my dad had. And the mirrors, I have to say, is a wild story, which also involves another kind of artist and caretaker of this history, Brontes Purnell. Saved these mirrors for literally 20 years, knew the history of the space, knew that it had been an important, you know, Black queer space. And I think he ended up kind of working there in an organization that occupied the space a few iterations after my father left, and somehow had the opportunity to take the mirrors home and use them for dance classes and had them in various homes, literally steward them for 20 years. And then when I did the project at the lab in San Francisco, you know, Brontes is connected with that organization. He learned about the project and knew that person's daughter who ran this bar was now doing a project. And so I picked these mirrors up from Brontes' home and turned them into an artwork. And it was like one of the most emotional things to just think about these mirrors, what they've reflected and witnessed, and how people saw themselves in these mirrors, and to know that someone took care of them for so long. You know, mirrors are a hard thing to take care of. It's not like photographs that just go in a little archival clamshell box. So that was so meaningful to me. And basically the art intervention was just to fabricate these glitter frames they kind of hide behind the profile of the mirror, so you can almost not see them, and it's really like a literal reframing and, you know, visual conceptual reframing of these broken mirror shards into these sort of heirloom, you know, precious objects. And yeah, thank you for asking. I get very excited when I think about the mirror.
No, that's fantastic. And I feel like the story could then parlay us into so many other conversations about archives and stories and histories and keepers of things and moments. But I think we're gonna have to save that for our larger group discussion at the end of this program. But for now, I think it's time. We're delighted to present a screening of The Beauty President by Whitney Skauge.
Because I've always loved politics, I saw an opportunity to be a politician, you know.
And who am I? Well, I'm Joan Jett Blakk, Queer Nation's candidate for president in 1992. That's right, we're gonna put a drag queen in the White House.
At some point, I realized that I actually made a little dent in history.
Everyone has a voice. They keep telling us everyone has a voice, but what do we hear? Absolutely nothing. That is not a voice. Everyone has a voice when I get elected.
When I came out, you heard about gay people. This whole broad community, you felt like you were a part of. It was like being at the forefront of this great new world. First thing that brought it into it was AIDS. Not many groups of people have had to deal with your friends dying at an early age like we did.
I was watching you walk down the street, and a lot of people were shaking their heads. What do you say to those people?
I say that they don't know beauty when they see it. They should be shaking their heads at George Bush being the president of America and not doing a damn thing about AIDS or health care. That's what they should be shaking their heads at, not me. The
government responded very slowly. At first, they ignored it completely because it wasn't happening to people that they care about. It wasn't happening to, you know, middle-of-the-road white people. It was happening to Black people. It was happening to drug addicts, and it was happening to gay people. Doctors didn't want to touch you, you know, and we all lived in, okay, what do I do if I get it? You know, who's going to take care of me? What's going to happen? Our thing was visibility. I mean, we were still being beaten up. We were dying from AIDS. We were being denied jobs and housing, and, you know, and the more visible we made ourselves, the less that happened.
I'm sure you all are wondering what we queers are up to now. Well, we're going to the White House.
The presidential campaign is one of the most worldwide visible things. Everybody talks about it. It becomes a huge issue in the media. So when the presidential race came up, all right, let's do that.
I'm going to be the beauty president, and everything's going to be beautiful.
We decided I was going to do that. We went in City Hall and filled out the papers to be a write-in candidate.
Ronald Reagan was elected president. Now, if a bad actor can be elected president, why not a good drag queen?
Then we got the opportunity to do the convention, the Democratic Convention in New York, 92, that year. And boy, that was really something, because it was kind of scary. We were going to be gay press. We had press passes. Well, that day, we figured it out that they were not going to let me walk in the convention in full drag.
You know, it's obvious that they don't want us to get anywhere near this convention. This convention, this whole situation is not for everybody. It's only for a select few. But that does not include us, because we could not get anywhere near. And if that doesn't include us, then it doesn't include 98% of the people who are watching this.
What I decided to do was go in, not in drag, right? I had to go into the men's bathroom in the stall and did it in there. I was almost done. Some guard comes in. Somebody probably told him, there's a woman in there. So he came in, knocked on the door. He said, hey, this is the men's bathroom, right? I said, there's a man in here. But then they came and they handed the pass over the top of the stall. And he was still standing there, and I opened the door and was like, bye. So we get on the floor. Every camera that saw me went, right? But when they asked me, are you, supporting Bill Clinton? I said, no, I'm running against Bill Clinton. They were like, what?
Oh my God, Joan Jett Blakk, the only drag queen presidential candidate in the United States. And I'm down here on this floor saying hi to all of America. Why, look, hi, America. Oh God, this is so exciting. Look at all these people, hi y'all. So here we are, bringing queer issues to the campaign, right here, right now, in a dress.
But I said, I really am running for president. And they were like, well, what would you do if I said, well, healthcare. We should have healthcare. Period. I was going to take the military budget and the education budget and switch them. I was going to fire everyone in Washington and hire my friends just like they did. We were going to do all of that.
What are you going to do for the military of the U.S.? Well, I'm going to ban the military, so we won't have to worry about the military banning homosexuals.
What would you do about this police state, Joan? What would you do?
Well, first of all, I'd fire them all of them. I don't think we'll have much crime if people know who's really protecting them, you know what I mean?
I tried to make as much sense as I possibly could out of where I was and the voice that I did have. And that's what people heard.
A deep and profound change is needed in our attitude toward the world, our life on it, toward each other, and toward our conceptions of what is politics.
Once you get rid of all the hate and all the anger, then things run smoothly. And that's what's never happened in this country. It was founded on who's better than whom. And once we're all equal, then it'll be smooth and no one will take advantage of anyone else. So it'll be very easy.
Yay for Joan. Yay, Joan.
The name of the next president of the United States, Joan Jett Blakk. Joan Jett Blakk. Joan Jett Blakk. Joan Jett Blakk.
This being able to talk to people is not an accident. It's something that I use for good. Somehow it actually worked. That our being more visible made it a little bit easier. I can't help but think about all of my friends that are long gone. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about some of them, or one of them, or two of them. I have this little thing that I do before I go on stage. Beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty to the left of me, beauty to the right of me, beauty above me, beauty below me, beauty all around me. And I think of my friends. If, we don't say their names, they'll go away. So we have an opportunity to keep their power alive by not shutting up.
How about another round of virtual applause for that amazing film? Thank you so much, Whitney, for your film. I guess my first question is, how did you meet Terence?
Yes. So, well, first off, thank you. And thank you to the Fowler. I met Terence, I found out about Terence online. I was doing research for Breakwater Studios, which is the company I work for. And I came across this article that essentially said 1992 drag queen runs for president. And I clicked it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like A+, knock it out of the park. I have to know more about this. So through a series of just Googling, I found Terence online, found an emailed Terence, and then we were pretty much off to the races from there.
That's amazing. One of the things I was struck by is that I've never heard of this particular race. So I liked hearing about these write-in candidates in that process. So what was your process, I guess, in like finding that archival footage that kind of showed that this history existed?
Yeah, well, that was part of the reason I really decided that the film needed to be made, was finding the archive. I basically met Terence and just kept Googling. It was this period of time in between us filming and us talking. So it was kind of this lull in the process. And I just kept Googling, and I was like listening to like house music and like trying to like find my process with it. And then I just came across the Chicago Media Archive, and someone had uploaded raw VHS footage of Terence during his campaign. Someone, had the foresight, A, to record it in the first place, and then B, to house it somewhere. And we're lucky enough that we were able to use the fair use system, which basically, if you put the archive in context with your footage, you're able to use it legally. So that's what we did in the film, was we fair used it. But again, I mean, I can't understate how amazing the internet is these days. I mean, as a young filmmaker, it's really this treasure trove of amazing stories that just need to get raised to the surface. And I'm really happy that I was able to do that with Terence's story.
One of the things that I really enjoyed was like the kind of dreamy look that you kind of used. So I kind of wanted to know what went into that and why you chose to use that kind of glass on the interview portions.
I wanted it to be like Terence was on stage. I wanted to present Terence in a light as positive as possible, because I think something that happened a lot during the campaign was everyone thought it was a joke. Everyone just thought it was a publicity stunt, or that it was, funny, and all of these things that made it not viable. And I really had this very sharp perspective that anything I did in the film needed to frame Terence as if he was a real candidate. So having him in beautiful lighting and to the dreamy aesthetic, I think part of that was I'm very nostalgic as a person. And so I think that naturally seeps into my filmmaking. I had an amazing DP on the project. Their name is Haley Watson. And she and I just kind of tried to figure out, how do we make Terence a star, was really what we were trying to do. So that's kind of, visually, we took that and we ran with it.
Terence, inside the film, talks frequently about how the point of telling these stories is to kind of in remembrance of the people that he's lost along the way. So I kind of really like that kind of comes across in the film itself, and the way he tells stories, and also how you tell Terence's story. So I wanted to know if like that was built into how you imagine what this film could be.
Well, it's really interesting because, essentially what I did was I talked to Terence on the phone for like 30 minutes. And then maybe a month later, I'm in San Francisco. We shot during COVID. So we had a very strict on-set protocol. So like I kind of said hi to him, and then we're like behind these like plastic sheets and all of this stuff. And so I just interviewed him. I had no idea what he was going to say. I had no idea that was going to be his perspective. I had no idea how many people he had lost. And this is right up against the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. And within that movement, a very big element of that movement is honoring and remembering those we've lost. And so it was just so much synergy happening at the time that was just something I couldn't even imagine. And so when Terence at the end of the film starts talking about how he wants to honor those who came before him, and you have to say their name, and beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty all around me, that's purely Terence. I had nothing to do with that. All I did was make sure I put it in the film, you know. I really, with every decision I made in the film, and this is one of the best notes I got through the process, was let Terence tell his own story as much as possible. So having a first person interview and then really not cutting away from him that much unless really, really necessary.
And then in the process of getting the archival footage and speaking to Terence, were there things that you were surprised by in that process?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think honestly, the thing that was most surprising was the sadness. There's a lot of pain still for Terence, and not that because he didn't become president, that wasn't the point, but the point was that he had to do that because nobody else was going to bat for his community. Nobody else was doing community care. Nobody else was doing community safety in his immediate circle. Obviously, you had ACT UP and you had other organizations that were activating around the AIDS crisis at the time. But in terms of a central figure for this small group of people, I realized that Terence lost all of them. And it was just shocking as someone that has not gone through a lot of loss in their life to realize that. And so I think that was really surprising, talking with an elder in the queer community and realizing, wow, like this isn't just something in the history books. This isn't just an NBC News reel. Like people lost a lot of friends and family and coworkers and just everything. And so the magnitude of grief that is inside Terence is not anything I think I'll ever have a real understanding for.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like I could talk to you forever, but we are actually going to be joined by our moderator, May, who's a friend and a colleague, and have a larger discussion.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for having us. I'm the director of the UCLA Film and Television Archive, and you know, these conversations, the kind of archival threads, so to speak, I think that Sadie had mentioned, are so interesting as we discuss these works and the spaces that, you know, they hold. So my first question actually dovetails off of what you were saying, Whitney, what you were saying earlier, which was, you know, that Terence Alan Smith sentiment and him talking about, you know, keeping these stories alive. Sadie, you talk a little bit about, you know, mirrors as heirlooms and these pieces that are the responsibility of keeping these materials available in your piece. I'm wondering if you can discuss, you know, how your works serve as genealogical acts, or if you feel in that way. I think queer archives hold an interesting space of telling stories generationally along a line that isn't necessarily always blood family, but also chosen family. So I'd love to hear you both maybe discuss that if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, in my case, it is both blood family and also it's like, you know, I feel that I've inherited a world that is so different from the moment that my father ran this bar in. And it's by no means perfect. There are a lot of really trash, fiery kinds of things going on, you know, from like, you know, anti-trans to don't say gay, like just so many things that I'm not going to say like, oh, thank you for giving us a perfect world. We still have so much work to do and so much becoming to do and undoing to do. But, you know, when I really think about some of the things that I do get to kind of take liberties in and the way that I get to, you know, express myself and be fluid and not even bother to explain, I just feel that I owe a huge debt of gratitude to, you know, those queer elders who have come before me. And I always say, like, especially the queer elders who kind of roll their eyes at that term, you know, like, who you calling an elder? It's just like to have respect and honoring without like overly having too much reverence and quietness and preciousness, but to just kind of like see people as fully dimensional people while also honoring and kind of, you know, mixing it up with those stories and with what they've given to us. I think that, you know, it's important to ground the moment in which my father sets up this bar. It really wasn't that he had like an entrepreneurial dream to run a bar. It was really because of the racism that him and his friends were experiencing at the white queer bars in San Francisco. And, you know, this is well documented, but I think also kind of largely forgotten or not, you know, talked about enough. But him and his friends would be asked for 3 forms of ID at a bar. He talks about going to one club and it was kind of becoming like a happening dance scene, and a lot of like black and brown folks were kind of turning it into a dance spot. And they came back the following week and all of the Black music had been taken off of the jukebox, which like obviously is a service to no one. But you know, so it really wasn't that he wanted to just set up a bar because he thought it would be fun or cute, but it was because they had nowhere to be in dignity and be cute and be fly together. And so we had to make this space out of necessity. So I think that's a really you know, important part of the project for me.
Yeah, and I would say for the beauty president, I felt this kinship to Terence that I couldn't explain. And I think that's the kinship of queerness. That's the kinship of Blackness. You don't have to speak you have this language that you just know inherently because of the identity and experiences you have. And so I felt this really intense responsibility, almost like Terence was a family member, to honor and protect his legacy. I felt really angry that he was forgotten and he was lost. And so for me, it was really just an act of trying to like almost like help out my uncle that I just discovered was in my life. Like I just have this like really like soft spot in my heart for Terence and his story.
I feel like what you're saying too, it's like this double erasure, like erase and conversation at the time, and then also now if we're not remembering and telling these stories, it's like a double erasure. Right. And I felt the exact same way about my dad having to make the space and then the space not being known.
Right. It's like for us at Breakwater, we always like to say that, you know, we are trying to close the gap between historical significance and cultural relevance and making that much smaller, because there are so many people that have done historically significant things that have no cultural relevance or understanding or acknowledgement or even a byline in a textbook, you know what I mean? And it's just it's why, and we all know why. And so I'm trying to attack that and get underneath that and be like, no, this is into that question of why is it dreamy? Because it's art. Like I want it to be beautiful and I want it to seem like it's something that has its place.
Beautiful. Thank you, Whitney. Something you mentioned, Sadie, talking about time travel. You know, we think of archives sometimes as spaces where you can time travel or where communities and cultures might be documented or where stories can come to life. But archives have these sort of complex roles as well, complicit in erasure and reinforcing sometimes the status quo. So I'm curious for all of us in this room, you know, what responsibility do artists and curators have to holding space for those missing in the archives? And also our relationship to historicity and authenticity, which I think, you know, kind of blend, particularly when we think about collections, how they're represented, how we describe things in our collections and our work. So opening the floor to that prompt.
Maybe jump in for a second and just say, I think that question is so important for at least myself working as a curator in an archive, but also just as someone who's kind of interested in history and culture. And that as much as the archive is this kind of opportunity to hop into a different time, the desire for archival content is always in the present, is from someone going to the archive and wanting to see something from the past. And it tells us as much about that moment as it does kind of our own history. And so recognizing, and I think what both Sadie and Whitney, your work does so beautifully, which we didn't kind of get to in our individual conversations, is just kind of starting to address that gap. You know, there's a lot of things that can be saved, archival materials, footage, photographs, mirrors, things that have tangible reality that we can have in the present. And then there's so much stuff that hasn't been saved or couldn't be saved for a wide number of reasons. And so it's kind of, how do we deal with that history that we know existed, that we know happened, but we don't have a kind of physical, tangible thing that's in the archive in the present. And feel like your work and so many artists who are kind of thinking about this lineage and history are starting to address that by recreating or imagining or filling in. And that's something that feels like so important to starting to address it, and simultaneously just saying, you know, there are always going to be things that are unknowable, things that weren't saved. And how do we kind of keep expanding while knowing that that full expansion, there's never going to be an encyclopedic archive that has absolutely everything. That's not possible. And so how do we kind of address that in all the ways and all the skills that we have?
I think that's so.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just. Oh, we're just going to talk. Sorry, I was just going to jump real quick. I just wanted to like respond a little bit to it, and this is kind of what I was thinking also when Whitney, you were talking about your point in finding that research. Sometimes, and the importance of archival and curation and curating is recognizing that there's a history that we've been actively told not to look for. We've been actively pushed away from learning from, because that footage of Terence did exist. No one thought to go looking for it initially. Someone at the time had the wherewithal to record it, but it didn't exist in a film until Whitney made the film, because people didn't know to search for it or didn't know there was a reason or a need to search for it. And I think sometimes the job of the archive is to move beyond assuming what is historically significant and going to spaces and finding out what we've lost in our kind of assumption. I feel like I'm frequently having conversations around, oh, that didn't happen in the past, or that is like a modern idea. And then you go back and then you realize, no, none of these are modern ideas. We just assume they are because we didn't know it existed, but it does exist. Someone has that information. And I think part of our jobs as curators, as artists, as people, as archivists, is to like sometimes rid ourselves of an element of hubris or an assumption of what the past had or didn't have, and then allow ourselves to realize that there's probably more that we just don't know, that there's always more. I mean, we're all students of the world, and history is just a form of storytelling. We've just allowed certain people to tell the story this entire time. So like, how do we undo some of that? And that's part of our job. Sorry.
Yeah, I think to me, it's really that idea of, you know, the unknown and the unknowable, because if this bar that was in San Francisco, you know, at this crucial time could be almost lost to history and almost forgotten, you know, if the name had just left when the people who were there passed away, if that was possible, then obviously it's possible that there's so many other important spaces and people that are just not going to be known and written down and recorded. And I think it's so important to kind of, I think that what happens sometimes is that as we reclaim our history, we can hold on to like a few individuals and characters, and we kind of get this like celebrity relationship to history, like this hero kind of, you know, star individuals who stand out from history. And I'm trying to kind of make space for like the everyday collective organizing and just, you know, kind of nebulous networks that were happening, and kind of get away from such an individualistic way of thinking about these histories. Because a lot of times when I talk about, you know, my father's work in the Black Panthers or his work with Angela Davis, people are like, oh, what was his name? And they expect to have heard about him, because after doing all these things, well, you'd think your name would be in the history books. But even my dad said, like, you don't need your name to be in the history books. You just want to read history and know that you were there and you participated. And so I think there's something that I'm trying to do that's kind of trying to trouble this idea of like these, you know, spectacular individuals who changed history, but kind of bring it back to a more collective approach.
Yeah, I think that's so great. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking about the collective, the communal, and that unfortunately, you know, we're doing a virtual screening for Whitney's film, but that film screenings really are kind of communal act, and so much that comes up in your activation are really part of the Eagle Creek Saloon is having people in the space for bars, dance parties, activations, and something we think about the archive too is the archive is only as good as the people come use it and the stuff that we can find and make available for folks who are coming to do research or entering the space for the first time. And so that it really is about that kind of communal coming together rather than the kind of individual. And it's about the people as much as the stuff.
Beautiful, Lexi. I mean, I think a lot about these projects is like commenting a bit on the presence of absence and what these spaces create for us. And there's a bit of a weight to it, right? Whitney, you reflected a little bit on this and that you were surprised by kind of the sadness and melancholy that this, you know, that your project kind of created for you. I'm curious for all of us, you know, there's a gift and a weight to being caretakers of histories and stories. And in the sort of modalities that we operate, you know, how do we carry that weight? And what stories do we want to see more of?
I just want to go into like a massive room with every archive that is available and just like what Sadie was saying, find that collective strain, right? Because progress doesn't happen overnight in a vacuum. It's several people over a long period of time moving together in this one way. And so I would just love to keep highlighting, like Sadie was saying, that everyday person, you know, because I think there's this perception that, you know, queer people and Black people weren't just living their lives like, you know, like we are today. And like, you know, some people were just living their lives and that's okay too. You don't have to be on your soapbox, you know, fighting for change to be relevant and to be important. I think everybody has value and everybody deserves to be recognized. So for me, like, I just want to keep going at it, keep finding more stories, especially with a queer lens to it.
For me, I kind of, because my interactions with archival is the film side of things, I feel like history similarly has this auteur theory, because it's all storytelling. The idea, and it's a lot of what Sadie was saying, is like an individual changed everything. But the thing is, the more you engage with history or with archival stuff, is you realize it is the collective, it is a group of things. It's things, but not just like an individual collective doing the exact same thing. It is one group doing one thing, one group engaging this way, and it's all working in tandem or sometimes not in tandem to create the reality that we currently have. And I would like to see more examples that kind of like disavow this like auteur approach to history, where it's just like, it's the one person who did it. It's the one person who yelled. It's the one person who threw a brick. It's the one person who did this, when it's all part of a giant movement of individuals working together and working in different spaces to make change, to create change. And I think like history is a form of storytelling. So of course it's going to have the exact same tropes that we deal with in storytelling in general. So how do we engage and undo some of that assumption of this is, because I feel like it affects our present. We create this space where we keep building up icons, and when they fall apart, we assume the movement has now fallen apart, but that's not how movements work. The work moves beyond the individual. So I feel like that would be really interesting for me, because I think the only way that we really grow is from learning from the things that we've done before, or from, you know, seeing the things that we've done in the past.
Whitney, I want to push back a little on your comment about having a big archive and all of us having access to it. I think what this conversation has also shown is that these kind of spaces of community and storytelling also are very localized too. And there is this beauty to having something that's not necessarily gate kept. And I think that's the thing that is common of the view of archives is there's a lot of gatekeeping, there's less collaboration, which is kind of part of what we're talking about here is that. So not to disagree with you, but thinking about, you know, how these spaces operate, my dream is hundreds of archives out there that have, you know, an authenticity and also support for the works and the stories being told, because no one archive can do it all, right? Lexi, I'm sure you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, well said both. I think, yeah, no one archive can do it all. And the more kind of material that's made accessible, actually accessible, is really important, as well as the work that I think all of us are doing in different ways to kind of educate folks on what kind of things we want in an archive. It's not just the kind of iconic or heroic, but it's the everyday. And so if everyone could kind of share that kind of goal, and, you know, so much of the work, I mean, is Brontes Burnell keeping the mirrors. It's someone at one archives going into someone's basement and saying, we really need this material, not need it, but there's really value for this material outside of just it being in your basement. Can we help you preserve it in a way that's true to your own kind of history as a person, but also to a larger community? That seems to me so much of the work of this kind of archive building in a way that's going to be inclusive, that's going to be expansive, and that's going to kind of push us towards more stories being told in the future.
And I think that might wrap us up. Thank you so much, Lexi, for those closing comments. I also want to thank the Fowler Museum and Bianca Collins for helping drive, you know, this group of people to talk about our different practices and where we, you know, the stories that we try to tell. So thank you so much. And I'll hand it off to Bianca.
Well, the honor is definitely mine and the Fowlers. Thank you so much, Sadie, Whitney, May, Farida, and Alexis for joining us today. This program, as you guys all know, has been a twinkle in my eye for a couple years, and I'm just so grateful to the artists and to my colleagues at UCLA and across town at USC for investing your time and energy to make it happen today. Again, it's really been an honor. And thank you to everyone who joined us. This program has been recorded and it will be available in a few days on the Fowler's Instagram and on our website. It will also be made available on UCLA Film and Television Archive's virtual screening room for you to revisit and share as you see fit. We hope that you'll join us again for our next program. You can find information on the closing slide. In the meantime, have a great evening and hope to see you next time. Bye.